The afterlife within the world of Pokemon is often stolen from people and Pokemon, because instead of simply ceasing to exist or moving on to an afterlife, we have 100 different events that can occur when someone dies. Your soul could be used as fuel, your body could be overwhelmed with psychic power, and you could be transformed into a Pokemon. You can come back as a vengeful wraith, have your soul trapped within inanimate objects, but you can also stick it to the Grim Reaper and cheat death itself, becoming immortal. As such, I've decided to dig into the world of Pokemon and bring to you the many ways that the afterlife is stolen. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and we're simply going to go through the Pokédex and bring up every single Pokemon that has evolved to take and use the souls of other creatures, even if it's not for consumption, effectively stealing the afterlife. We'll discuss the ways that Pokemon cheat death and every Pokemon that used to once be human, passing away only to be reincarnated as one of the many creatures that exist within this world, and maybe some extra fun examples. We will not be talking about every single Pokemon that just simply steals life energy. Life force is somewhat separate, but sometimes the same thing as the soul itself, but not actually stealing the soul. You could have your life force taken away from you and become a ghost, or go to the afterlife still. But I will add in Pokemon that are not receiving a peaceful afterlife, because in my personal opinion, if you are in the afterlife and you're called to the earth to help fight, or your energy is called upon, you're not actually being given a peaceful afterlife. As such, I'm including those here. And despite the discussion of death, I am going to keep this as upbeat and happy as possible, so let's get started. Ninetales. A legend claims that Ninetales is the reincarnation of 9 united noble saints. While intelligent enough to easily understand human speech, Ninetales is a vengeful Pokemon known to curse those who mistreat it. Ninetales will also curse anyone who decides to grab any of its 9 tails, and the curse can last up to 1,000 years. As mentioned in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, once a Ninetales casts its curse, it cannot be removed even by the Ninetales itself. So sure, Ninetales will pass away due to natural causes after 1,000 years, but at the same time, it can curse you for up to 1,000 years. I don't know if you know about this, but we do not live for 1,000 years. The only confirmed individuals that do so would be AZ, specific Darumaka being the ones that enter their Zen mode, and other immortal Pokemon, or ghost Pokemon, I guess, for that matter. Then we take into account the idea of 9 separate individuals, 9 separate souls being merged and reformed as a singular individual. That itself isn't necessarily an afterlife stolen, but it is a bit odd that, again, 9 people become one entity if that rumor is true. While it isn't exactly stealing away the afterlife itself directly from Pokemon itself, there is a theory that Kadabra was born from a transformed human child who could not control his powers. Can you imagine being born some incredibly talented psychic within the world of Pokemon only to transform into a Kadabra because you could not control your powers? There are hundreds, if not maybe 1,000, psychic and medium-based trainers within the world of Pokemon, and of course I don't see every single Kadabra as a human child, or at least transformed from a human child, but some of these Kadabra that we run into, if this rumor is true, absolutely could be. We also don't know if Pokemon and humans are separated in the afterlife. We know there are plenty of alternate dimensions, from those created by the Unknown to Arceuses and even the Trio of Myth, upon many, many, many others. So I wouldn't be surprised if some Pokemon ended up in a separate dimension in the afterlife from other humans or each other. Ghastly produces a faint, sweet smell. The toxic gas surrounding the main body can induce fainting and suffocation, and is capable of enshrouding an enemy of any size. Poisonous gas comprises 95% of its body. It's said that the remaining 5% is made up of the souls of those who died from the gas. I would actually go as far as to argue that Ghastly is made up of not only the souls who died from the gas, but is literally made up of gases released by rotting or decomposing corpses. Considering that it produces a faint, sweet smell, the smell of cadavers has often been described as the same, and we often find Ghastly in the highest population, where? In cemeteries, graveyards, where a large amount of those gases can leak out over time from the ground. We're not done with Ghastly though, because Haunter can control its hands from far away and can control any Pokemon that it touches with those hands. Hunter have also been depicted as being able to cast illusions, pull out spirits from an individual's body, and even remove its own eyes from its face. You know, just sandwich the terrifying part right in the middle there. It doesn't just take life force or give you a horrible death by licking you and causing you to convulse until you die. No, it straight up reaches into your body and pulls out your soul like some evil Danny Phantom. But guess what? It still gets worse with Gengar. It apparently wishes for a traveling companion. Since it was once human itself, it tries to create one by taking the lives of other humans. It does this by slipping into your shadow and just waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. In other words, it will end you and then force you to be best friends with it forever. I love Gengar. They are my favorite Pokemon, by all means, have been since I was little, since I first started playing the games. But at the same time, I would rather not die. And I especially don't want to get kicked out of heaven just because of my favorite Pokemon. But just you wait. It gets even harder, more difficult to live and survive and see said afterlife once it G-maxes and Mega evolves. Because with its Mega evolution, it can pass through other dimensions and appear anywhere. It caused a stir once when it stuck its leg out of a wall, and only its leg. It can watch you from the other dimension, and it has no interest in opponents unless it deems them to be prey. Even having relationships so warped that it will try to curse its own trainer. It makes me wonder what limits there are to its dimension hopping. It could kind of suck to think that I was already safe in the afterlife. I blink and I just Gigantamax Gengar's mouth is also rumored to not lead into its body. Due to its cursed energy, it is believed to instead lead into the afterlife. I call BS, but let's continue. By laying a trap, it attempts to steal the lives of those it captures. Should someone stand near its mouth, they can hear the voices of their loved ones calling out to them. That, my dear viewer, is psychological torture. If you go in there, you don't know where you'll go. But if you don't go in there, you'll never know if those are truly your loved ones or not, and you will never know until the day that you kick the bucket. Look, again, I love this line of Pokemon. They are my all-time favorite, but that's terrible. I mean, with G-Max Gengar's mouth resembling a tunnel, it's like forcing yourself into it, eventually following the light at the end of that tunnel that you're expecting to see, only to wind up Arceus knows where. In the Generation 1 core games, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, before the player reaches Lavender Town, members of Team Rocket invade the Pokemon Tower and attempt to steal the skulls of Cubone in order to sell them for large amounts of money. However, one Cubone was protected by its mother. The Cubone escaped, but its mother was killed. As a result, the Marowak's ghost remained in the Pokemon Tower, forbidding access to the topmost floor. She appears as the ghost that prevents the player from ascending to the top floor until they obtain the Sylph Scope to identify her. In the Generation 1 games and Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green, the player has to battle her to calm her down. Despite being a wild Pokemon, she avoids all thrown Pokeballs, even while sleeping. Once she is defeated, her soul is calmed, and she departs to the afterlife, granting the player passage to the top floor. In Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, after the player reveals her with the Sylph Scope, she does not actually initiate battle. Her child, Cubone, calms her spirit instead, and she then departs. So, at least for a while there, we have a protective spirit, maybe a wraith of sorts, a revenant actually would be more fitting, something that has, unfinished business, that is unwilling to move in order to protect her own child that is still here on the mortal plane. It is tragic, but beautiful. We have another Pokemon that fits into the idea of reincarnation, as the indomitable soul is reborn into a Pokemon. Hitmonchan is said to possess the spirit of a boxer that had been working towards a world championship. This Pokemon has an indomitable spirit and will never give up in the face of adversity. We'll find through this whole study that the emotions of people in the Pokemon world are so strong that they allow rebirth, reincarnation, or for those negative feelings to take a physical form in the form of a Pokemon, which that itself can be argued to be, after those people pass away, those grudges, those ghosts that do take form as a Pokemon rather than just a pure emotion. Here's one that raises a lot of potential questions regarding death in the Pokemon world and how it doesn't always lead to the afterlife. When Corsola was wiped out within the ancient oceans of Galar due to climate change, it came back to the mortal realm to live on as a ghost coral. Like, literally ghost coral, because yes, this is what happens to real coral as the temperatures rise within the waters, bleaching and effectively killing the coral. And as tragic as it is, this is easily one of my favorite regional variants. But it doesn't really end there, as it can now evolve from Galarian Corsola into Cursula. Cursula's overflow of ectoplasm is the result of a long and continuous process of absorbing spirit energy from other creatures. Not life energy, not life force, spirit energy. The ectoplasm causes whoever touches it to become stiff like stone. We have a Gorgon situation here. Medusa. Don't look into her eyes. Literally look anywhere else. Look respectfully. But in all seriousness, this is very much a classic ghost, harboring itself within the dead husk of a Corsola, which is metal as all get out. But not only does it continue to live, refusing to go into the afterlife, and it's now a depressed little beep boop beep boop beep as it walks back and forth, teeter-tottering all over the place, because it actually enjoys it now because it's a lot lighter, but also becomes something that will take its vengeance out indirectly as it absorbs souls from other people. We got a 2-in-1 here. One story you are very likely aware of is actually the story of our legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. One of my top favorites being here, Suicune. But in the Johto region, 150 years ago, 3 unnamed Pokemon, either having always been named Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, or starting out as a different Pokemon entirely, we still don't know, were present inside the famous Brass Tower. One day, a lightning bolt hit the tower, starting a huge fire in it, which would be later put out by a sudden downpour. The 3 Pokemon perished in the fire, but as the sun rose, Ho-Oh appeared, granting the trio new life as legendary Pokemon. The 3 nameless Pokemon were reborn as Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. I love that. The story is amazing. I mean, we're gonna keep going, but I have such a soft spot for them because I've said it in almost every other video. Pokemon Crystal is my first Pokemon game, so, you know, Heart Gold was my most played or replayed Pokemon game, and I love it so much. And seeing Legends ZA and Chikorita come back and it's maybe get a new regional form or whatever it's going to happen, I'm very happy because that was my first Pokemon. So, anywho, let's continue. The 3 were to be said to represent the lightning, fire, and rain that transformed the Brass Tower into its current state. At first, the humans of Ecruteak City were in awe of this miracle, before that awe changed into great fear of Ho-Oh's power to manipulate life. This fear leads to the townspeople threatening violence on the revived trio and Ho-Oh. Instead of retaliating back, the trio and Ho-Oh disappeared into the wilderness. Initially, the trio never returned out of fear of the violence the humans would inflict on them. At some point, they did return back to Brass Tower, awaiting a time when they could trust humans again. A being that can reverse death itself and give a proper rebirth. After all, Ho-Oh is a rainbow phoenix. In addition, there are a lot of interesting ties between the beasts and Ho-Oh. In fact, Suicune is said to seem to have the closest connection with Ho-Oh, while Suicune also has a weird connection with the unknown, and then we know the unknown are tied into Arceus. I've made this comparison before in my ridiculously long 8-hour video breaking down every single legendary mythical and how they're all tied together with real myths and inspiration. So if you really want to listen to my theorizing on that, go piecemeal that video or fall asleep to it every day of the week until you finally hear it all, because, you know, those watch hours help this channel a lot, actually. Speaking of, before we move on to our next entry, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this so far, please make sure, if you are not subscribed, subscribe. Share this with other people. Like the video. Comments as we go along. I'll throw out some prompts, and I do like to read all of the comments, even if I don't react or comment back to them all. And if you'd like to go the extra mile to support the growing channel, become a member for as little as $3 a month. With that then, once again, thank you so much for watching, and back to the video. Old folklore in Kitakami tells of a mischievous child who was reborn as a Pokemon. This is interesting considering that we get a lot of other similar accounts, mistaking it for a child in other regions or generations, and Lombre overall being mischievous by doing things such as tugging on fishing lines at night. And you know what? Let's go on a tangent. Because I have talked about Lombre so many times, yet I have not once gone on a tangent to talk about its inspiration in depth, the Kappa. So, from an old website, not actually old, but from a website I used to visit all the time for other videos, yokai.com, I get the following. Kappa are aquatic reptilian humanoids who inhabit the rivers and streams flowing over Japan. Clumsy on land, they are at home in the water and thrive during the warm months. Kappa are generally the size and shape of a human child. Despite their small stature, they are physically stronger than a grown man. Their scaly skin ranges from a deep earthy green to bright reds and even blue. Think of Lombre's shiny and original colors in addition to how its color palette is in general. Kappa bodies are built for swimming. They have webbed, thumbless hands and feet, a turtle-like beak and shell, and an elastic waterproof skin that reeks of fish and is said to be removable. Ugh. Other inhuman traits include 3 anuses that allow them to pass 3 times as much gas as humans. I pre-read these, but then I forget about them because I have the brain of a golden retriever and a goldfish mixed together. Yet somehow I remember so much information, and here we are with this again. And 4 arms attached to one another inside of their shells. Pulling one arm lengthens it while the other arm contracts. But their most distinguishing characteristic is a dish-like depression that lies on top of their skulls. Literally the rain dish on the Lotad line. This dish is the source of a Kappa's power and must be kept filled with water at all times. Should the water be spilled and the dish dry up, the Kappa will be unable to move, and it may even die. So we can see so many of these traits expressed in Lombre's visual design and characteristics, which is amazing, let alone the other forms that we have with Lotad and Ludicolo. Not so much Ludicolo, we kind of lose it once we get there. But there is honestly a lot of yokai inspirations in Pokemon, but I won't go down that rabbit hole today. Maybe one day in the future. Stealing your life from you next is Shedinja. Shedinja's hard body doesn't move, not even a twitch. In fact, it appears its body is merely a hollowed shell. It is believed that this Pokemon will steal the spirit of anyone peering into its hollow body from its back. And what do we see every single time we send Shedinja into battle? It's back. So, if you have a Shedinja in the Pokemon games at all, then you are in fact already a soulless little goblin. Where do these souls go? Great question, honestly, because Shedinja doesn't even necessarily grow in size at all or change how it looks. So, you know, we have Shedinja here, stealing souls. It's got a wonderful little halo above its head as if it's some false fallen angel while being dead itself. So who knows? Maybe it will crack open one day and release a bunch of souls and they'll finally be released into the afterlife. Until then, the souls go goodness knows where. Sableye lead quiet lives deep inside caverns. They are feared, however, because these Pokemon are thought to steal the spirits of people when their eyes burn with a sinister glow in the darkness. Now, I will admit, when I see Sableye, I see a greedy little jewel thief that has died and come back, and there is zero confirmation of that, let alone a hint towards it in the slightest. But in the case of Sableye here, I actually kind of doubt that it does steal souls, and even if it did, maybe it would have done it once or twice, leading to what is now only seen as an unconfirmed rumor within the Pokemon world. Alternatively, Sableye is just getting really excited, its eyes flash when it does see somebody, which at the same time, they mainly stick in caves, meaning that their eyes are gonna flash towards you when you have like a torch, a flashlight. So of course, every single time you see a Sableye, its eyes are gonna flash because its eyes are jewels. Now this next one is a little bit more of a speculation on my part, doesn't necessarily belong, but I wanted Baltoy here anyway. It is usually found in ruins and old graveyards, where it assembles with its kind and unleashes loud cries. Old cave wall paintings depict it living with people in ancient times, and as seen in the Pokemon series Ruby and Sapphire episode, Me, Myself, and Time, an ancient civilization used Baltoy for time travel when spinning on a magic circle artifact. Though when we look at Claydol, we get the following info as well. It was said to have started its life as an ancient clay figure created 20,000 years ago by ancient people, who apparently modeled it after something that descended from the sky. I don't know what that thing from the sky is, and I can't think of anything. Oh wait, maybe it has the same tattoos as Rayquaza now that I think about it. Oops. Either way, this is less about taking the life force or, you know, anything else from others, but rather Baltoy, at least, is a Pokemon that is left behind. As the ancient civilizations passed away, Baltoy has been robbed of the afterlife, not being able to pass on and be reunited with those that it loves, its creators. Thus, it has the curse of immortality and cries at night at those grave sites. Another entire line of Pokemon that brings us something terrifying and ominous is the Duskull line. Now, Duskull itself simply does just eat the vital energy of children specifically. We really start having problems with Dusclops though. Dusclops absorbs anything, however large the object may be. This Pokemon hypnotizes its foe by waving its hands in a macabre manner and by bringing its single eye to bear. The hypnotized foe is made to do Dusclops' bidding, and anyone who dares peer into its body to see its spectral ball of fire will have their spirit stolen away. There it is, another stolen spirit just by looking into its body. Stop. Just stop looking into the bodies of ghost-type Pokemon. That's the easiest way to make sure you keep your soul. And it said that anything that does enter its body will just never be seen again. So, yes, of course. It's always the ghost types that are a typical problem. Children here, and we do get some additional sketchy info regarding Duskwire. The antenna on Dustwire's head allows it to receive transmissions from the spirit world, which tell it to bring people there. Let me just pull up my radio transceiver. Oh yeah, you gotta get Jimmy Hawthorne from the store down the street. He's about 78 years old. He has a giant hole through his chest. He is walking around right now, still alive, as if nothing has happened to him, and we can't allow other mortal people to see him. Otherwise, they'll think that they're all immortal. So, if you could, just go pick up Jimmy, take him into your stomach, and lead him into the afterlife. And that's, I mean, obviously, yes, if a person dies within the Pokemon world, they don't just keep walking around, though. That is kind of a sick idea that you could get a mortal wound and then still be walking around until the Grim Reaper gets you. There's got to be stories of that somewhere, but I digress. Duskwire almost literally just does do this. It appears before the dead, brings their souls into the afterlife, and people really, really fear Duskwire because of this. It's the Grim Reaper, and sometimes it may accidentally take the souls of those who are still alive. At least it's a very rare thing that does happen. It has been shown to protect people from being taken to the spirit world. It is unknown, though, if Duskwire actually has a will of its own, or if it is forced to follow the bidding of the transmission it receives. The band on its body can open to be a mouth, and it is capable of using its belly to swallow its target whole. It also uses this ability to take spirits into its body, carry them home, or as it travels to unknown places. Duskwire only consumes spectral essence, leaving only the empty remains of living beings untouched. So again, we only have speculations even within the Pokemon world, not truly knowing what's going to happen. Of course, this is a children's game, so it isn't going to completely confirm nor deny the idea of a true afterlife, but the idea that our Grim Reaper could be making a mistake, could be bringing us, you know, maybe to the real afterlife or somewhere else altogether, or just simply eating us, is a wild situation to deal with. Another trio that weirds me out is actually the Snorunt line, because Frostlass lives in snow areas and has the ability to freeze foes with its negative 58-degree Fahrenheit breath. It is thought to display its victims secretly after freezing them, and enjoys preying on handsome men, climbing in the mountains, but also has been known to take Pokemon. Its favorite food is frozen souls. Okay, so that's its mother, or could potentially be the mother. I don't know exactly how you freeze a soul, admittedly, but the fact that she can freeze a soul does scare me. I don't think a single other Pokemon out there has the power to do that. Frostlass is a female-only species, and it's said in legends to have been formed when the spirit and lingering regrets of a woman who was lost in the mountains possessed an icicle. Basically, Frostlass represents two of our problems with the stolen afterlife. Not only does it eat souls, but it is also the soul of a lost spirit. It is representative of the tale of the Yuki-onna, and it is incredibly similar while having some distinct differences. One being that in one of the tales that I did read regarding the Yuki-onna, she kills one man, tells the other one who is a young man, "Don't ever speak of this." And he's like, "Got it, you have a promise." He then ends up meeting a beautiful woman who is very clearly Yuki-onna to the reader. They go 10 years, have multiple children, And then while he's speaking to his wife, quote unquote, he's like, yeah, I lived a great life. There was one point where I almost died, and I met the Yuki-onna. The wife ends up turning into the Yuki-onna. It's like, you broke your promise, and you're lucky, because the only reason I won't kill you is because we have beautiful children together. But don't ever harm a single hair on their head, or I will have your soul. And it's like, woo, okay, all right, this took a very different turn than what I'm used to, but it's really cool as far as the story goes. Now, moving on to the other potential parent of SnowRun's is Glalie, who is said to have been born from a boulder that has absorbed the distress and regrets from any mountaineers that got lost on icy mountains. And of course, what happens when you get lost on an icy mountain? I mean, odds are, at least, in this specific case, you die. You're dead, son. Though Glalie is not necessarily the male counterpart to Frostlass, considering that Glalie can be both male and female. Was it only me who thought that, you know, all Frostlass were female and all Glalie were male? Is that just me? I think it's, you know, just assumptions because of, you know, the way that they're displayed. Nevertheless, what makes this all strange is that we have ghost number uno and ghost number 2, and they are smashing to then create a non-ghost and a non-ethereal, a corporeal creature made of ice that is one of my favorite ice-type Pokemon of all time. That has fur. I don't actually understand. The more you think about it, the weirder and weirder it gets. It makes me wonder if there needs to be a video about every single time the Pokédex lies to us, because this is weird. I wish I had a better way to describe it. One I personally believe is a bit of an Afterlife steal is what happens to Latios in the Pokemon Heroes movie. By the end, after the bad guys basically destroy the Soldew and have the entire city set to be doomed, just absolutely wrecked by a massive tidal wave, and who knows what else a tidal wave, just some people partying as they move in and just stamp down the entire city. It's so stupid. Either way, Latios, in order to save the city and our heroes, replaces the Soldew by transforming into it, effectively sacrificing itself. I'd like to say that it's implied, even if it's just by the name of the Soldew itself, that Latios is simply conscious within the Soldew and will continue to live within it until the end of time, or until it is broken and another Latios replaces it, since there are multiple Latios and Latias. Drifloon and Drifblim in the Ultra Sun Dex for Drifloon, it states, its round body is stuffed with souls and expands each time it leads someone away. This is really one of the only Dex entries that states something as specific as this for this Pokemon. Otherwise, it's always implied that Drifloon just carries them off, away, and then they can come back after being lost. There are also rumors of Drifblim carrying people to the afterlife, in which there are poems and songs dedicated to Drifblim due to people admiring its transient, melancholy aspect. In addition, the raw material for the gas inside its body is souls! So when it pops, it's just this massive, terrible, terrifying screams of the afterlife. Souls that have finally been released and could go and be at rest. Makes me think of Drifblim, like when you do the little Drifblim popping minigame where you're just throwing rocks in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Try to imagine people actively actually trying to pop Drifblim with a rock, which just throwing a rock count as a rock type move if you're a human. That implies a whole other thing in and of itself still, but then still flinching because of the blood-curdling screams. That's why it has aftermath, because when it pops, oh my gosh. Every time you knock out a Drifblim, does it just deflate? And then you put it into a Pokeball, put it onto the Pokemon Center, it gets healed, and now it has a full body again? There's so many questions. There's so many questions that I have, and the implications are terrible. Everyone knows Spiritomb is a classic. 108 evil spirits trapped inside the Odd Keystone. They basically go back into a number of different stories, primarily one of the original stories where there was, again, 108 evil spirits. They get trapped into a stone, and eventually there's a general that does release them way off into the future, like thousands of years later, and those spirits come out and become like the 108, like, virtues, essentially. These spirits having repented, being reborn, and actually being able to become good things in the world. and instead of passing on into the afterlife, they continue to help people. In the case of Pokemon, those spirits never repent, the odd keystone cracks open, and we get Spiritomb instead. I would really like to see if Spiritomb were to ever get a Mega form, flip it on its head completely. I mean, completely flip it on its head. Take that dark ghost typing and turn it into another ghost fairy, or turn it into like a fighting something or other. Something that takes the darkness within this Pokemon and transforms it into that benevolence that it deserves, that would be part of those stories, those original tales. Due to it being a human long ago, Yamask retains its memories from before it became a Pokemon. It becomes furious when the mask is lost or taken away. If someone wears the mask Yamask carries, it will become possessed by the Yamask in question. I'm saying Yamask from now on. I don't care that I mess up the word. It's driving me crazy. It's so difficult to say Yamask. It's like people who say, what is it called? Hammock or hammock instead. It's driving me crazy. Anywho, sorry. Sometimes it looks at this mask and cries, apparently in longing. Yamask is known to wander the ruins of ancient civilizations. So, not only are humans being turned into Pokemon due to their lingering pain, but then they could possess a person once more. How many layers of Pokemon people inception can we get here? Could a Pokemon that put on the mask be possessed by a human that was trapped in another Pokemon's body? I'm getting a headache. I think I messed that up somewhere, but I think you get what I'm getting at. Now, we're going to jump ahead a little bit, but don't worry, we're not skipping any Pokemon, because Galarian Yamask is really not that different either. Galarian Yamask is said to have been born when that tablet was drawn to a vengeful spirit. The tablet bears cursed engravings that resemble a serpent's tail and is said to absorb Yamask's dark power. This process, brought by an ancient curse, triggers Galarian Yamask's evolution into Runerigus. So, some random angry spirit is mouse-trapped by a tablet and forced to become a Pokemon because of the tablet itself. I will admit, once again, Galarian Yamask and its evolution are actually another favorite variant of mine, but I'll briefly explain Cofagrigus, and then we'll get back to the whole Runerigus situation. Cofagrigus does directly state how Cofagrigus is said to have once been human, but having forgot its memories from when it was alive. It is a Pokemon formed from an old enough human soul that has become malicious and is a creature of emotion, eating gold nuggets, turning people into mummies, and waiting for more victims. Runerigus, though, was formed from a painting imbued with an ancient curse, which was activated by absorbing the spirit of a Yamask and brought the painting to life. Anyone that touches its shadowy body will have the memories behind its painting's creation forced onto them. So let's break this bad boy down. Jormungandr, the world serpent, Norse mythology, and the idea of how you should not touch the old stones that bear their markings, as they basically serve as the gravestones to old world Vikings or people who worshipped within this religion. All of those come together to give you this exact Pokemon visually, through its Pokédex, and even through how you evolve it. You evolve it within an area that has stones aligned to look like an old ship. In addition, there is an old tomb nearby, and all of that and the idea of reincarnation, the life points that it loses, matches the number of days it would take for reincarnation to take place. It's amazing. And I didn't figure that out myself. That is something that I've had to research and look up and deep dive after seeing what other people have said on the internet already, and be like, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. It's one of the worst Pokemon to evolve by all means, but it's still amazing in the ideas behind it. Ultimately, though, this whole Pokemon line is arguably the most known Pokemon for having once been human, and they have it rough, crying as they remember their past, feeling the pain of their lives, all while being turned into Pokemon and eventually evolving into creatures that would spread their pain to others as they are trapped in this mortal realm now. I've talked about Zorua and its Kitsune form so much that I'm doing this completely off script at this point, but Zorua does represent the Kitsune by all means. Kitsune are trickster foxes. They can come in benevolent, good forms that protect shrines, and overall are good luck-bearing or luck-giving spirits Alternatively, they can be full-on trickster foxes that do cause a lot of problems, transforming into people, speaking like them, so on and so forth, unlike what Zoroark can do in its full extent. At least, until it gets into its Hisuian form. Now, when we look at Zoroark in the past, specifically looking back in Hisui, the reason why we don't see normal Zoroark is because the legend of the Kitsune is what we see there. We see this full-on folklore brought to life. People then fear Zoroark, push it out of their towns, their cities, whatever, and because it's such a cold, harsh environment, these Zoroark are not going to survive their time there, which results in their death. Then, because they know who caused their death, the people that pushed them out, the people who are wrong to them, even though Zoroark just wanted to live, just to eat, to drink, to play, to enjoy their life, to smile after a playful trick, it's unfair. They feel that pain, that wrath, that unjust anger that was pointed towards them, and they decide to turn it around. It bears energy, negative energy within their bodies, and rebirths them into their Hisuian form. No longer allowed to go into the afterlife, the pains of the mortal world trapping them here with the power of a grudge that then superpowers them, allowing them to go even further with their abilities, especially as they evolve into Hisuian Zoroark, being able to create illusions that can now harm people. But those same illusions, with that incredible power, does cause lacerations to their own body, yet they do not care. This Pokemon is a wraith through and through, though you can bring them peace by befriending them. It is a very incredibly difficult thing to do, but if you can befriend them, you can grant them their peace, and it actually might be why we don't even see those Pokemon in Sinnoh in the future, because maybe one day people realized what they had done wrong and were able to repent, to apologize and show that they have changed, and allow those Hisuian Zora and Zoroark to pass on into the afterlife. Frillish and Jellicent is another one, and I'm not going to be all emotional about this one. They deserve to live at the bottom of the trenches that they do. Now, when we look at them, I've said it a million times. I've said it in like 3 of the last videos that I've been making, but the fact that Jellicent straight up looks at cruise ships and is like, yeah, I'll take that one next, vroom, and takes it all to the bottom of the sea, fantastic. And every soul that they take, their crown gets bigger. Beautiful. The problem, though, is that they aren't just taking the life energy from other Pokemon. In fact, there is rumor that Frillish specifically, leading into Jellicent, of course, as well, but Frillish specifically are people from an ancient underwater civilization. We're talking Atlantis, baby. So maybe they were from Atlantis. Maybe these were people that were on the first couple of ships and they started passing away by drowning within the Unovan lands. But nevertheless, their souls are trapped here, deep within the waters, and they're happy to bring more souls to play as they create more Frillish and more Jellicent. We can see this reflected in their designs, as Frillish has the frills, has the very fancy royal-looking garb to them. Meanwhile, Jellicent, their evolution, does have the full-on crown, being kings and queens of the deep. And you can't have a kingdom without any subordinates, after all. Litwick and its entire line is really an absolute terror. Litwick will pretend to lead you down the lanes of a cemetery or graveyard, trying to show you the way, maybe if you're lost, all the while ensuring that you never actually find your way, as its flame continues to steal your soul and allows its own flame to grow brighter and larger. Lampent gets worse as it can sense when people are going to die, so what it does is it'll just go right by a hospital and just wait, and maybe it'll look at Grandpa through the window and be like, you're gonna go soon, and then your soul will be mine. You will never see the afterlife. No, you will only see the inside of this glass cage in which my flame burns. And then lastly, when we look at Chandelure, its fire leaves no damage on the body, but literally burns the human soul or Pokemon soul or whatever else to nothingness. It is said that any spirits that get incinerated by Chandelure's flames end up losing their way and are forced to wander the mortal world forever. I like this Pokemon. When I first saw Litwick, I caught it. I caught it on the spot. I said, I love you, you're mine, you're staying on my team, I don't care what happens. Never figured out how to evolve it into Chandelure when I was little, but nevertheless, I kept it into the Elite Four as Lampent. And then I'm older and looking at its information and being like, oh, it took my soul, most likely. I'm most likely just, when I die, I'll just wander the earth. Aimless. Never meant to see the afterlife. Because of a Pokemon that I thought was cool. Cryogonal is born in snow clouds, although there are rumors stating that it is born from people and Pokemon that have died on snowy mountains. When its body heat rises, it will turn into steam and vanish, but it will revert to ice when the body temperature lowers. How does your body temperature lower if you don't have a body? I never thought about that till now. Also, they'll drag people and Pokemon to unknown locations to never be seen again, so they're likely creating more Cryogonal while doing this. Cryogonal is an incredibly weird Pokemon because within the same generation, you have Cryogonal. Melts, but can come back. And it's the same Cryogonal. Vanillite. Melts, dead. Is not a ghost. Actually, neither of them are ghosts. They're both pure ice types. So what is going on here? I don't understand, and I hope we get to see more in the future. Again, maybe get to see a Cryogonal variant that allows us to see what Cryogonal's real form is. Another Pokemon that kind of belongs here but doesn't at the same time is Golett and Golurk, mainly because when I look at them and I look at AZ has a Golurk on his team. He created the ultimate weapon. We don't know what energy is inside of Golett and Golurk, but since they're Pokemon, I would like to suspect that they do have infinity energy within them, meaning that there is a very good chance that Golett and Golurk, also being ghost types, were created with the clay, giving them their ground typing, and then had infinity energy from other Pokemon put into them. That then gives them their infinite lifespan, but we also know that Golett's energy will soon run out. Give it a couple thousand years, and of course that's going to happen. But then, we also know that they will roll clay balls together, and while it says the reasoning is unknown, we also, again, know that they are made of clay. Terracotta, potentially even. In which case, Golurk, being just a larger version of them, much larger, is likely, even though it doesn't say so, a combination of a bunch of Goletts becoming one giant entity. And, again, going back to the idea of infinity energy actually potentially being the spirit of Pokemon, these are just a bunch of spirits trapped within a clay shell. It's a bit of a theory all in all, more than actual solidified proof, but it's fun. In Pokemon Black and White, the player must go to the Celestial Tower, and when you go there, you will find Gym Leader Skyla caring for a fainted flying type Pokemon she saw while flying her plane. After she has healed the Pokemon, she insists the player rings the bell at the top of the tower. Later in the game, the player can meet Champion Alder here, ringing the bell to comfort the spirit of his very first Pokemon. Alder was not always a great trainer in the past, and it's basically his way of repenting for what he did as he sought strength and power primarily. And if that Pokemon is still on the mortal plane, having to be comforted in this way, again, it goes back to my own personal belief of its afterlife is being stolen, but will eventually be comforted enough, hopefully seeing that Alder has changed, and eventually truly live in the afterlife one day. The Honedge line, another set of Pokemon that are an absolute menace to society, while also stealing the afterlife from people. Honedge is said to have been born from a person's soul after they were killed by the sword that it resides in. Its sash is prehensile, and it holds its sheath when it is battling. Honedge is known to wrap its sash on people's arms and suck their life energy if they dare to grab it by the hilt. Can you imagine just how much of a spit in the face that is? To be killed by a sword, and when you die from it, your soul gets trapped inside of that sword. And while Doublade isn't really that much worse, just splitting it to two swords when it evolves, unlike how many other Pokemon like Diglett or Magnemite work, Aegislash is a problem I have harped on a billion times. Aegislash possesses incredible spectral powers, enabling it to manipulate people and Pokemon alike. It is also able to detect the innate qualities of leadership. Legend has it that whoever it recognizes as a worthy leader is destined to become a king. In fact, this Pokemon has attended and served generations of kings. However, an Aegislash was rumored to have drained the life of one king, causing his kingdom to fall alongside him. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this line of Pokemon overall would be causing more people to get trapped within swords. They know how they became a sword. They're clearly intelligent to some capacity, and they are a little bit tricky. Now imagine an Aegislash that leads a country through hypnotizing or having physical, mental, spiritual control over a king, leading armies of people into battle, causing death after death after death, ultimately creating more hauntings to exist within the world, all because of violent war and conflict, the same way that hauntings would have been created, all dictated by Aegislash itself. More classics that people are very much aware of are Phantup and Trevenant. Phantup just being a child that gets lost in the forest, passes away, and now in its afterlife is sitting here going, will you be my friend? I need friends. And then accidentally, not actually meaning to, leads people through the forest, gets them lost, and then they pass away. When it eventually evolves into Trevenant, it does become a protector of the forest and will attack anybody who dares to harm it, while also protecting all the other Pokemon there. All the other rumors that the Pokédex says are actually false. We know this because of the fact that it does have multiple moves or abilities that do show that it is a nature's guardian by all means, and it was a Pokemon that would actively drive off lumberjacks that would dare harm its forest. So you can imagine a real Beauty and the Beast situation, Gaston running back to town being like, there's a Trevenant out there, and how everyone's gonna band together, bring in the fire types, and blaze everything down. Pumpkaboo and Gourgeist, as I sit here knowing there's a Pumpkaboo right over there. With Pumpkaboo and Gourgeist, the whole thing that they have going on is that they will pretend to be children. More specifically, Pumpkaboo will actually hypnotize you with its laser eyes, and from there, just take you wherever it wants. Who knows what it really wants from you? It'll be formed from a multitude of souls and spirits to begin with, giving you the different sizes that make it up, but at the same time, it is going to steal your life energy or even your soul. So no matter what, it itself is a collection of souls that cannot really go on to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Gourgeist is another just terrifying menace. Will sing up and down the streets, cursing anybody who hears it. If it catches you, it sings to you while having its vines wrap around you as it steals your life force. Or it'll pretend to be a child, it'll pretend to be an adult, doesn't matter, knock on your door, and then, when you answer, drag you away to never be seen again. Alolan Marowak rubs the bone it wields against its forehead, to light the ends in a green flame and then twirls the flaming bone. The flame is made from the spirit of its deceased mother. The deceased mother has transformed into a vengeful spirit that will protect Alolan Marowak. It specializes in an attack where it releases a weak ball of flame from its bone that will relentlessly pursue its foe. Alolans would fear it for a conjurer, due to its rarity and the fearful sight of it dancing with its bone. The dance is also used as a way of mourning for its lost allies. Once its flame has spread to an opponent, they are impossible to put out with water. The cursed flames are known to cause both mental and physical pain. So we have a Pokemon that, while it is a protector of Pokemon and is very social, it is still a Pokemon that is harnessing the power of the dead. At least this time, it isn't against their will. Though this also means that the mother will only ever really be able to rest again once Alolan Marowak passes away. This lands in that gray area again that, while it isn't actually stealing away from the afterlife, it's also not allowing the mother to truly rest and be completely separate from the mortal realm, And that, to me, once again, is synonymous with not actually quite having an afterlife. Also, the whole idea of being a Pokemon that grew to specialize in a flame that can't be put out with water on a collection of islands is brutal. It's one of the most well-adapted Pokemon to their environments, especially since it is stated Alola has a lot of Pokemon that will actively target or are in general very harmful to Cubone to begin with, and so that external pressure allowed it to evolve into this form. Through its dance, Oricorio Senzu style draws in nearby spirits and borrows their power to fight. It is a full-on conjurer. I don't think I have ever truly cared for Oricorio outside of the Senzu and Byleth style, but I love the way that they look, and once I start to look into it more, the idea that they call full-on spirits to aid them makes it such, like, a cool image within my brain. Just imagine it posed, and these green spirits, very Dr. Facilier spirits, coming out of the woodwork, gaseous energy coming up behind them, and surrounding the foe. Or even all being pointing at you. Sandygast is known to inhabit beaches and is born from grudges that seep into the sand, such as from Pokemon that suffered defeat in battle or the deceased. I feel like a broken record talking about Sandygast and Palossand as well, but honestly, the two creatures are incredible threats if left unchecked by the people of Alola or even nature itself. Long story short, outside of the fact that Sandygast will try to consume other Pokemon or make others help build its body so it can become Palossand, or even how Palossand can become larger than a building, the cycle of Palossand breaking up or just creating more Sandygast in general is basically its method of capturing more souls and to create more Sandygast, which allow them to trap those souls within their bodies and then use their bones as ammunition. Dhelmise likes to claim through its Pokédex that the soul of a seaweed adrift in the waves became reborn as this Pokemon. It maintains itself in new infusions of seabed, detritus, and seaweed, but we also get from the Sword Dex that after a piece of seaweed merged with debris from a sunken ship, it was reborn as this ghost Pokemon. We know Dhelmise is friends with Dragalge, which is capable and very actively sinks any ship that enters its territory by spitting out its poison, which will melt the bolt hole and allow water to sink inside, sinking the ship. So you cannot convince me that the Dhelmise aren't simply the souls of those lost to Dragalge incidents or other traumatic events at sea. What adds to it is that what it does is it hunts Wailord, its preferred prey, which is very much like the tale of Moby Dick and his hunt for the white whale. Even though Wailord isn't white, it's all a metaphor, especially as, if I remember correctly, Captain Ahab, hunter of said whale, did die trying to hunt it. So it's a big ol' circle and reference to that story. Tapu Fini has been shown to make water clocks out of water and bridge the world of the living with the world of the dead using mist. As stated in Memories in the Mist, long periods of exposure to this mist can trap people within it forever, specifically targeting those who cannot endure the pain of seeing a deceased loved one once again. My favorite horror beyond human comprehension, being forced to witness my deceased loved ones repeatedly in new situations, likely very reminiscent of scenes in movies where they attack my greatest insecurities over and over again until eventually I crack and collapse on the ground. Only the best of psychological horror here within the world of Pokemon. You might argue this one, but this all goes back to the idea of infinity energy and souls likely being linked in some capacity. Magearna was created by a scientist as a gift to royalty, specifically to a king's daughter 500 years ago. The soul heart in its chest is an artificial soul that was created by the scientist by collecting life energy from other Pokemon. Due to Magearna's ability to feel others' pain, it will try as hard as it can to save injured Pokemon. It can even perceive the emotions, thoughts, or feelings of other Pokemon as well. This brings to the brain a lot of different questions. Does the affinity energy that fuels every Pokemon actually represent a portion of their soul? Is it just their soul outright? And if that is the case, what does that mean for the ultimate weapon? Theoretically speaking, if infinity energy can be taken or given through the ultimate weapon, through Xerneas and Yveltal, and it also gave AZ and his flow at quote-unquote eternal life, then it could potentially even run out. This also could mean that Magearna could also come to a natural end at some point. It's just a matter of when. This could also imply that all the Pokemon used to make Magearna might live within its so-called artificial soul, effectively stealing away their afterlife, which would also explain why it has emotion and understanding. Galarian Moltres' sinister flame-like aura will consume the spirit of any creature it hits. Victims become burned-out shadows of themselves. Looking at most of the other information, you would have assumed otherwise that it's just something that makes vitality go away, or something that just makes you feel burnt out if you were near it, but no. This is what the Pokédex says, giving us more Pokemon that do consume our spirits just by being hit by their flames, which I don't know what's worse, having your spirit go away or, you know, a 4th degree burn, which doesn't exist. Actually, by all means, if a 3rd degree burn goes to the bone, the 4th degree burn goes down to the spirit. I'm making that the new rule. With our Urshifu, we actually have Pokemon that grants the afterlife, separating evil spirits from the bodies of those within the mortal world. Gigantamax Single Strike style Urshifu, that's such a long name, has been called the very embodiment of rage and a divine emissary that banishes evil spirits with its fury. It is believed that Gigantamax Single Strike style Urshifu can rid the world of its malevolence through its terrifying expression and shouting. Gigantamax Rapid Strike style Urshifu maintains a perfect one-legged stance in a calm, unflinching manner. Opponents who face it might feel greatly agitated or experience a sense of relief as if freed from evil spirits. Gigantamax Rapid Style Strike Urshifu, I messed up the name, it's such a long name, could supposedly destroy those with evil in their hearts by simply glaring at them. Both, once again, involve the removal of evil spirits. If you want a modern example of something along the lines of this, then you're looking at something, let's say, Jujutsu Kaisen. Though the belief of spirits weighing people down physically and mentally is something that has existed for a very long time. It's just, now we're getting Pokemon that practices in banishing these evil spirits, similar to how a priest would, but with their fists. I need that as a movie. Give it a terrible, cheesy line or, you know, name for a movie like Combat Priest or Boxing Priest. Lather the hands in holy water and get in the ring. As Spectral desires isolation and silence, it tends to be active during the night where its energy is heightened. Its nocturnal habits resulted in it having weak eyesight, but its other 4 senses are keenly sharpened. This allows Spectral to have an accurate sense of the terrain and location of living things. Its kicks are said to separate a soul from its body, and it can steal the life force of sleeping beings. Imagine getting behind Spectre by accident, and it's just that scene from Endgame where Banner just gets pushed out of its own body. This also says nothing about how you can return to your own body, or if you can, and we know through the history of this Pokemon that if you do somehow end up in this situation, Spectre does not care. It does not give a single shred of empathy towards you. It will not help you get back to your body. It is a menace in history until Calyrex decides to come in and conquer it. All of Hisuian Typhlosion gives us a give and take idea of what it could do. Hisuian Typhlosion has graceful and refined movements and a gentler, more pacifistic nature compared to Jotonian Typhlosion. It can often be seen staring into space. It is assumed that as Hisuian Typhlosion does this, it looks at the flow of life energy and searches for wayward spirits and lost souls to eat. It is believed that it does purify spirits with its flames as it eats them before it guides them back to the afterlife where they belong. Despite its peaceful nature, it can lose control of its emotions when sufficiently angered, and can unleash ghost flames that can incinerate its opponents until nothing remains. It can emit a total of 108 ghost flames from the spots on its neck. Once unleashed, every single ghost flame attacks its opponents while taking on the appearance of ferocious beasts. So, breaking this down, we get a medium that can guide spirits into the afterlife, a creature that will burn your soul to cinders, and concerning the 108 spirits idea and its ability to purify spirits, I've always subscribed to the idea that Hisuian Typhlosion could not purify every spirit, instead being the Pokemon that sealed away spirits who were too evil within the odd keystones, inadvertently creating what would eventually become Spiritomb. Basculetion's evolution is achieved by a white-striped Basculin being possessed by the souls of other Basculin in its school who did not survive their harsh journey swimming upstream. Their souls wrap around Basculegion's body, particularly along the rear half. They are colored red on male Basculegion, said to be caused by the soul's rage, and light blue on female Basculegion, whose paleness resulted from the sadness within the souls. When it senses danger, Basculegion will turn hostile and attack along with its souls until the enemy is defeated. The souls within Basculegion are said to have a will of their own and provide it with the power needed to swim on without tiring. The souls enable Basculegion to navigate even the most turbulent rapids with ease. What makes this all even more interesting is the fact that you can find white-striped Basculegion within the Timeless Woods in the modern age once again. This is another Pokemon that you can take as you will. After all, these spirits did have the same goal in death as they did in life, but they are stealing away their own afterlife by staying so connected to the mortal world. Which, speaking of the Timeless Woods, it may literally be timeless, being able to preserve life in the moment, no matter what the quality is, forever. The most glaring sign of this is actually through the case of Blood Moon Ursaluna. This Ursaluna is very old, having used to live in the Hisui region a long time ago, until it drifted across the seas and arrived at Kitakami, where it made residence in the land's Timeless Woods. It gained special powers due to adapting to a hard environment of Kitakami. It is highly alert, and rarely makes itself seen, but it tends to appear during foggy nights. Blood Moon Ursaluna can unleash the full brunt of its spirit from the red moon mark in its forehead. While Pokemon living longer than your average animal isn't something that is strange, we also do know Pokemon age in general. They also make it a very strong and apparent point to say how it is old, how it's been alive since the Hisuian times, which would be the equivalent of the Edo period being up to 400 years ago. Our Blood Moon Ursaluna is also very much withered, aging, damaged, yet somehow continues to live. I mean, its eye is just basically gone, and I would like to blame the Timeless Woods itself. So as long as the creature stays within these woods, they may never die, and they will never know the afterlife. Makes me really want to cover a video on, like, the sin of time travel and how much has been ruined due to stopped time, reversing time, time travel in general by both people and Pokemon. Armarouge and Cerulege. Armarouge's armor is said to belong to a distinguished warrior, and it is source of its psychic power. Meanwhile, with Cerulege, the fiery blades on its arms burn fiercely with the lingering resentment of a sword wielder who fell before accomplishing their goal. Both of these Pokemon relate back to old tales that have been greatly dramatized and are a bit hard to find the true stories of. It is believed for Armarouge that one specific point of origin may be the legend of the Spanish knight Wilfred the Hairy of French direct ancestry, known for his golden armor and shield, on which was said the Emperor Charles the Bald painted with his fingers 4 red lines, using the blood of the former, in honor of his bravery. This might explain the red colorations on Armarouge's armor and extremities, as well as the use of French vocabulary in its name. Though I have become very familiar with El Cantar de Mio Cid, basically being the Song of El Cid, which I love talking about and is the inspiration for Cerulege. So, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, allow me to basically break this all down for you. El Cid basically lived this multiple tragedy lifestyle, and it's really hard to tell what was real life versus what was the song and the dramatized forms of his story in life. But it bounces up and down between success and then dishonorment, and then success and dishonorment. But by the end of it all, he was in a big fight. He was sent off. He conquered lands in the name of the country that he put himself towards, not his home country, but what he considered his home country. And in the final fight, before it could end, he actually died. And his wife set him onto his horse, sent the horse off into battle, and the whole idea was that you don't want to see your leader dead. So she set him up proper to make it look like he was still alive, sent him through battle, it bolstered the soldiers, and his people won the fight. And he did have 2 swords, very similarly to how Cerulege did have. I do talk about it more in an old video of mine when I was first covering a lot of Pokemon stuff. Just 10 myths and stories of Pokemon that most people don't talk about. It even has Cerulege on the front, because I talk about it in depth. It's a shorter video, and I don't know, if you really want to go listen to more of it, go watch that video. Bramlin are created when wandering souls unable to move on get tangled and fused to dry grass. Bramlin's main form of locomotion is the wind, which blows it uncontrollably to destinations unknown. It despises getting wet, and it makes its habitat in dry, rocky regions such as deserts. Imagine getting lost in the desert and getting just trapped with a bunch of other random souls, forced to exist within a single tumbleweed and roaming the sands forever. That sounds horribly annoying. I can only hope all the souls at least become one singular consciousness together. Otherwise, you have a bunch of people complaining about, we should have gone the correct direction. Oh, we should have taken a left. Oh, I don't know why I decided to keep walking for an hour straight when I already knew I was in the desert. Why did I think that I would suddenly come upon a city? Rabska's hind legs hold a ball over its body. This double-layer ball is reddish-pink, with purple cloud-like masses surrounding it, and it can glow brightly, revealing a cocoon-like infant sleeping inside. Rabska gently rolls the ball with its legs so that the infant inside can sleep comfortably. A hypothesis posits that the infant is actually Rabska's true body, since the body that rolls the ball around barely moves. We can take this little theory a little further though. What if, since this is a scarab beetle representing birth, life, death, and resurrection, in addition to its move that it automatically gets, Revival Blessing, that Rabska cheats death and the afterlife itself. Rabska can indefinitely create new infant bodies every single time it ages, and when it dies, it assumes the body of the infant once more and repeats the cycle. At the very least, it repeats the cycle, going to its previous form, evolves, creates this new infant, and then keeps going from there. Greavard is rumored to be the reincarnation of a dog Pokemon that had never interacted with a human and died in the wild. It primarily lives in Boreal Mountains, which we can actually tie this Pokemon to something I had not heard of before until I started going through this research. According to a magazine entitled The Musician's Register, the theme of death pervades the work of gym leader Rhyme, known as the MC of RIP, whose flows are said to bring the dead to their feet. The magazine states that when Rhyme was in her teens, her dear puppy Pokemon passed away, and she poured her grief into a song. When she sang it, her partner came back to her as a ghost Pokemon. This moment is suggested to be what inspired her rap career. This would explain why she has a Houndstone on her team more than just her simply being a ghost-type gym leader. I didn't need more reasons to love Rhyme and for her to be one of my favorite gym leaders of all time, but that little backstory for her makes me love her all the more. Although it does make me question, does she actually have some sort of extra spiritualist power behind her, and is it limited to just Pokemon? Annihilape evolved from Primeape when the rage in its soul became too much for its physical form to contain. It gained increased power as a result of its spirit, no longer being limited by the flesh. The rage that was bubbling inside fills its punches with force that frightens its targets to their core. It is literally a wraith. We have a lot of wraith-inspired Pokemon, of course, but I think Annihilape takes the cake as the angriest wraith there is. According to an old tale, Poltergeist was born from the regrets of an old tea master who was so obsessed with perfecting the art of the tea ceremony that he drove away everyone around him. Just one more grind. Just one more grind. I gotta grind, man. Just imagine, just in the past. Gamer. The man was just so obsessed with trying to create matcha that he continues to try and do so even in the afterlife. I mean, look at the Pokemon and how they stir themselves. And you know what the kicker is? It is said that their taste, these Pokemon, do not taste good. I've personally had matcha a couple of times and I've liked the extra bit of flavor. Never had it as like the actual matcha tea or the primary flavor itself. But again, it is really funny to think that even in the afterlife, this dude just cannot get it right. The treasures of Ruin are about as dark as it gets without directly being stated. The 4 treasures of Ruin were once normal objects originated from a distant land in the east of Paldea. These 4 treasures were a set of wooden tablets, a sword, a vessel, and a set of beads. As time passed, each of the treasures were corrupted by negative human emotions: grudge, hatred, fear, and envy, respectively, gaining life and gliding themselves in dead leaves, snow and ice, dirt and rocks, and fire, respectively, to create their bodies, becoming the legendary Pokemon Wo-Chien, Shenpao, Ting-Lu, and Chi-Yu. One day, in the ancient times of Paldea, a merchant came from the east in possession of these 4 treasures, traveled to the Paldea region, and presented them to the Paldean king. In excitement, the treasure-obsessed king quickly bought them all, keeping them in his castle with his other treasures. The king's greed, however, eventually caused the 4 treasures to awaken, transforming into their Pokemon forms. The 4 legendary Pokemon went berserk and caused a disaster that completely destroyed the castle and almost the entire kingdom afterwards. Eventually, though, the 4 of them were defeated and sealed away in different shrines scattered across the Paldea region by Pokemon wielders called out by the Paldean king. Wo-Chen was sealed within the Grass Wither Shrine, Chien-Pao within Ice Rend, Ting-Lu within Ground Blight, and Chi-Yu within Fire Scourge. Wo-Chen is actually the tablets on its body, where the evil deeds of the past were documented. Chien-Pao is actually the swords, which you can use your imagination. Ting-Lu is the vessel or bowl, which is literally a bowl that was used for people to sacrifice themselves to, at least with blood. And Wo-Chen are the beads, which you could also use your imagination as to what greed can drive someone to do. I also talk about these in that incredibly long 8-hour video in excess. I mean, they are amazing. These 4 items bear intense human emotion in great amounts, all to the point where they could be considered possessed objects by all means, especially if we look into the lore and history of it all. I mean, I have to ask, what are your opinions on them? Because I feel like people kind of, write them off and have no real interest in them. Meanwhile, I geek about them every single time I bring them up. I love the implications and the deep-seated real-life lore, and I know deep inside I would love to cover them in a future video, as explaining how China itself is a secret region within the Pokemon world just waiting to be explored, and how these Pokemon relate back to that and the just hidden deep history. With Professor Turo and Sada, bet you weren't expecting more people here, these 2 professors literally travel through time, jumping into different dimensions in the process of doing so, and they were only able to do so by essentially creating a copy of themselves with their labs, resulting in AI Turo and AI Sada, who are both exact copies of the professors in every aspect. This raises a very existential question, one that you may have seen in shows before, but what if you have an exact copy of yourself that exists digitally? One that has conscience, can think for itself, can understand, interpret, and just in general be independent. This brings a question of whether or not you are truly dead. Are you dead, or have you cheated death and become immortal through this external life? In the case of our AA professors, an argument can be made that they were simply simulating professors, but that is not the case, because they were able to break free of their own programming and tell us to put an end to the system before the ecosystem of Paldea could be ruined. Which brings me back to the idea of, the sins of time travel within the world of Pokemon, or just the great sins done against Arceus itself, the boundaries that you should not cross. We'll see what you guys get excited for in the comments. I have like 10 different videos that I'm kind of pumped up to do. This next one caught me off guard, as an unproven theory claims that Iron Hands was once an athlete who became mortally wounded, but was kept alive by being made into a cyborg. It strongly resembles Hariyama, though why this is the case is unanswered. And considering that this is talked about in the Paranormal Magazine, a magazine that a magazine that exists within the world of Pokemon Horizon specifically, we can't exactly consider this to be the 100% truth. Similar to how Iron Jugless is said to have been created when a Hydreigon fell in love with a robot. It's just one big parody of real-life occult magazines. And for our finale, we have the Loyal 3, which were defeated, and not just defeated, but full-on killed by Ogerpon. There are not a lot of Pokemon within this world that have confirmed kills. Koraidon, Miraidon, Ogerpon. Those are the ones that come to mind immediately, though Mewtwo is way up there. It's the OG murderer by all means. I mean, you cannot tell me anybody from that lab actually survived, with exception to Blaine. Nevertheless, the Loyal 3 died by Ogerpon. The people of Kitsukami buried them, set them up with a shrine, statues and all, and it isn't until hundreds of years later that when we arrive with Kieran, the 3 are revived It is not played around with in the slightest. They are full on revived, making them the second trio of Pokemon to be revived due to the powers of another legendary Pokemon. So that brings the question all over again. Why did the Loyal 3 come back to life? How are they revived? We know it's related to Petra runs. We know that they died. So what is it that gives a Pokemon the ability to revive them? Is it the toxic chains? Or are the Loyal 3 even actually alive again? They have their personalities, but what is going on here? And that raises, again, a million questions that we do not have the time to answer today. With every Pokemon cover now that messes with the afterlife in some way, it did have me curious about making a video called 1,000 Ways to Die in Pokemon, and I want actual confirmed deaths. I don't want it to be like, oh, this Pokemon can learn Flamethrower, so it'll burn you alive. No, I want the Pokédex warning us and saying, this Pokemon will steal your life. This Pokemon will, will burn you alive on purpose. So many different things, so many different warnings, rather than it just being, oh, let's look at the move list, and if they learn Flamethrower, then of course it's going to burn us alive. No, that's not good enough for my brain. It's not good enough for me. So I'll leave that idea out there, and that might be one that I'm putting on my list almost immediately. So if you'd enjoyed this, please make sure that you do subscribe, share this video with others, and even become a member for as little as $3 a month, as it helps the channel greatly. Go ahead and check out some of my other videos as well. If you haven't checked out my ecology series, go check that out. Maybe even go check out the complete Red arc, which is the complete first arc of the Pokemon Adventures manga. I read through it, giving you the synopsis of every single chapter, and give you plenty of examples on screen, or even just through reading them, and I would love to do more of that. With that then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!